Hello and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us after a thrilling 4-2 victory over Tottenham Hotspur. But before we get into any of that malarkey, let's see who we've got on the show today. We welcome back Joe. Joe, my friend, how are you?
I am doing blooming fantastic. What a way to round off 2023. One of the most, if not the most historic seasons, certainly in recent history as a Brighton fan. So yeah, absolutely buzzing, mate. How were you? How was your Christmas? Was it good?
Yeah, Christmas wasn't too shabby. The Budgeon household had gotten hit by a sickness bug. So it was one of those where it wasn't the best because we were just getting sort of over it, but it wasn't the worst. So, not too bad. Thank you, Joseph. Not too bad. We are also joined by our stateside correspondent, Dagan. Dagan, my friend, how are you?
Not too shabby, Tom. Everything's just smooth sailing. Everything's exactly as we expected, such as life, such as football, such as Brighton.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much just how we do things, isn't it? And finally, we welcome back Kurtis, friend. Kurtis, friend, how are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm glad to be here again. I'm looking forward to talking about that game. So let's do this.
Let's do it indeed. Yeah, it's been a funny string of results for the Albion recently. We've been a bit all over the place, to be honest. So going into this, I think many fans, including myself, we weren't particularly hopeful of getting a good result. But hey, what do we know? Joe, let's start off by dissecting the starting 11 because it's no secret. We've spoken about this quite a lot recently on the podcast. Injuries have certainly taken their toll. We currently have no fit and available wingers. So when starting 11 came out, which included 4 changes to the team that drew with Palace, Steele was back in goal for Bruggen. Milner, Buonanotte and Welbeck replaced Belieber and Matoma and Adinga respectively. It was a bit of a sort of who's who of where are people going to play. How did you think we were going to set up when you saw the personnel on that team sheet?
Yeah, I, like Dagan, was panicking that it would be James Milner at fullback against Heung-min Son, or slotting in at left back or left wing back, however he wanted to set up. I also believe that it might be a back three as well. But yeah. But when I saw Hinshelwood and Eagle, I was thinking, okay, that's much more balanced. It's got to be those two playing fullback. Hinshelwood has done so incredibly well since he's come in. 8 Premier League appearances now, 3 in the Europa League, I want to guess. And he's just taken to it like it's he's been doing it for 10, 15 years. The maturity of the guy is just next level. Going forwards, when you look at the winger options, I thought Joao Pedro would be the one that would operate a little bit wider, but that didn't seem to be the case. It looked as though it was Welbeck and Joao Pedro sort of alternating between the two positions. So I sort of half expected that as well. Did not expect James Milner to be at left wing. Absolutely did not. But we'll get more into that as we go more into what happened in the game, because that was special.
Oh, it certainly was. Dagan, I mean, it's no secret that we've been suffering with injuries quite a lot recently. And for a side that like to utilize the width of a pitch, having all of your available wingers, well, unavailable, it is pretty detrimental to the way we wanted to play. So did you not only expect a personnel switch around, but also a tactical switch to the way we played?
Yeah, I mean, we thought we had a sense of the lineup given the limited number of options we had available. I think 13 outfield players were available to start, and then you had Lallana and ESTUPIÑÁN who were available off the bench. The latter of which, boy, was he available. But what was interesting is the first time this year that we've set up with a 4-1-2-1-2 was the actual official setup with no wingers, in truth. So our response, even though Milner sort of ended up as the de facto winger, and I guess you could argue Gross did on the right coming from that side, but Hinshelwood frankly filled that space as much as he did. And then the interplay, as Joe mentioned, between Joao Pedro and Milner, with sometimes Joao Pedro drifting wide and Milner venturing centrally, or even making a stretching run into space, which he did on the first goal. Milner took a defender with him, opened up that space across the top when Pedro made that horizontal run. In possession, we were effectively in what I guess amounted to a 3-1-6 in possession. I saw a number of screen grabs of 6 players across the front. The other thing, I think tactically we were really, really intent on breaking up their play, and that was really impressive. And I think Tom, we have a lot of debates about Ferguson and Welbeck, but I think Welbeck did show himself really well in the counter press, and I think maybe has more energy for that at a longer capacity than Ferguson does at this stage, anyway, especially with him being banged up. So I thought that was excellent. I was looking at some stats, and I think I posted them earlier. We had the most interceptions that we've had all year. I think it was 18. No, I'm conflating numbers. I'll come back to those. But the numbers were impressive. I mean, our highest number of recoveries was 60. So that was a season high. We committed 18 fouls was the 18 number, which was our most of the year. And we're only fouled 6 times. So I thought, you would not normally associate a lot of fouls with great play. But in this case, I thought the fouls were demonstrative of the fact that we were putting so much pressure on them and not letting them turn with the ball, which made, their counterattack sort of neutralized. Anyway, I thought a lot of great tactical adjustments from De Zerbi in this game. And given what we were facing in terms of depleted lineup, really brave and really bold. But I think put us ahead in a way that maybe we wouldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah, very much so. And I think we'll definitely have to dive into that a bit later, because it was one of the points that I certainly picked up in that first half, just the intensity of our press. But we'll get onto that in just a while. Kurtis, Dagan's already sort of alluded to it. It was a big news in that Pervis ESTUPIÑÁN was back on the bench. Kurtis, were you a little bit apprehensive? Because obviously Pervis got injured previously against Aston Villa, then came back too soon, got injured again. Was there any apprehension for you that perhaps it might be another case of bringing him back earlier than needed?
I was more worried about the rust that he might have had, and that showed a little bit when he came on, but I'm sure we'll get onto that later. But yeah, it's always a worry when a player's been injured and then re-injured about throwing him into a game like Tottenham, really high intensity, really physical game like that. So yeah, it was definitely a concern, but he ended up impressing, obviously. So
yeah, he certainly did. And of course, as you say, we'll talk more about his contribution a little bit later. But Joe, let's dive into it then. Let's talk about the early warning signs for Spurs. That is, of course, that Brighton were well up for this game. Very early on, Welbeck went close a good couple of times. Sat in the stands, were you surprised at just how, you'll be forgiven for thinking that, this was a bit unusual for Brighton, because this season in particular, our first half starts haven't particularly been the best. We normally come alive in the second half, but this was a really intense start to the game with Welbeck, as I say, going close a number of occasions. Were you sort of surprised by just how quickly we started the game?
Yeah, it was one of those De Zerbi, this is Brighton performances for sure. He spoke a lot about how much the confidence in the camp had risen, even though there is so many injuries around, and how that mentality shift has been so important. And that was, exactly what we saw on the pitch. When I woke up yesterday morning, I wasn't up for it at all. My confidence was extremely low, as you guys saw in the group chat. But normally when that happens, it's really funny. I go to the Amex and I'm just totally surprised by this team that are so resilient against all odds to just go out there and perform against a Spurs side who, haven't been as impressive as they were right at the start of the season, but they're certainly a very, very good side still. They've got some incredibly world-class players. Yes, they had a makeshift back four yesterday, but we put them to the sword, and that's exactly what you'd expect when you've got, what did they have? 3 left backs playing. So it had to be that way if we wanted to really sort of shake them up a little bit. And they were shaken right from the very first moment. And yeah, the starting lineup again, people question it. People sort of question De Zerbi, but they just keep proving us wrong, and I just love it. We've got so many injuries, and we just keep bouncing back. And people are saying, "How are Brighton doing it?" Losing Caicedo, losing McAllister, losing so many players through injury. It's just a sight to behold. And am I naive enough to think that it can continue this way? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, there's just something about this squad, something about how Roberto De Zerbi gets the best out of anyone who steps onto that pitch and is in a Brighton shirt. So, yeah, really promising stuff, and we've definitely got a few things to look forward to.
Yeah, I think within that opening 10 minutes, I was almost screaming, where has this Brighton been for the last 3 weeks? It was just such a completely different performance to the ones that we've seen recently. And I think, you've hit the nail on the head, Joe, about how good Spurs can be. I do think it's worth just reminding ourselves that Brighton always play better against the quote unquote good teams. And we very much find it difficult to play against the teams that just sit back and want to hit you on the counter. But, the first 10 minutes were fantastic. And I was a bit worried that we'd come up against a Spurs goalkeeping masterclass. But Dagan, it didn't take very long at all for young Jack Hinshelwood to get on the score sheet. And what a goal it was. Not only the goal itself, but the work from Joao Pedro, who cuts in from the left-hand side. Sensational footwork from him. Lays it off to Hinshelwood, who just absolutely, leathers it into the goal there. And Dagan, that's Brighton's 19th goal scored by a teenager this calendar year, which is the most of any team in the Premier League, and is considerably higher than the team that's in second, which I think is Man United. So a fantastic way to start the game. And again, for young Jack Hinshelwood, who's just exploded onto the scene through injuries and whatnot. But I would go as far to say that I think he's been our best player for the last couple of weeks. What did you make of the goal and Jack Hinshelwood's contribution to the team?
Well, I mean, obviously the goal is huge, and being the first goal is even more significant. I thought his contributions across the board were outstanding. What he's bringing is just a consistent energy. He brings pace. He brings kind of enthusiasm. Everybody looks like they like the kid too, right? He's like everybody's little brother out there is sort of the impression you get. So I think there's a special joy anytime he does anything from the crowd who, recognizes this as sort of, Brighton through and through kind of kid. So all of those things check boxes, but being ready in the moment to just mush the ball. I don't know that he intended to play it directly over Vicario. I think all of us would have expected that to find a corner somewhere, but he hit it hard enough that it just didn't matter where it went. As long as it didn't hit Vicario squarely in the chest, it was probably going in. He was tremendous. I want to say again, that goal probably doesn't happen if Milner doesn't expertly clear that space. And it's the same kind of maneuver that we saw Undav make, clearing way for goals last year, that we've been sort of lacking up top. And I think, it's easy to miss it in the beauty of, Joao Pedro's run, which without his tremendous skill, frankly, without him yesterday, I think it's a very different game. I think he was sensational all the way around the pitch. His pressing, I know I named Welbeck earlier, but I thought Joao Pedro was tremendous. Joe's asking me if I mean Welbeck. In what instance, Joe, did I misspeak?
In the run.
No, it was Milner that had moved inside.
Fair play.
Ran through and took, I don't remember which defender it was, out of the way, but it Pedro was being occupied by whoever the right back was. And then there was a center back there waiting. Milner ran through on the inside and took that center back out of the way. And I think the right back was expecting, well, the center back's going to step up and help me. And so he gave him that space at the top of the box that he ran through. And again, also open up the space for that pass. But again, it's simple stuff. But I think he recognized, if I make this run, this will happen. And is this a spot? Is the Milner apology later? Is it now? So Milner, Mr. Milner, I apologize. I was not fully familiar with your game. I guess that's it. But I hadn't seen you on the wing. I hadn't seen him on the wing, or I guess really, in this weird, midfield structure that we had yesterday. But getting cooked at right back or at left back was something I was familiar with. He was not there yesterday. And I thought what his position brought out, and apologies for my dog if you can hear him in the background, going crazy. He's recounting my apology.
He's also apologizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're hearing, that's Milner. That's Milner. He's got that dog in him.
He does have that dog in him. But yesterday, all of his experience and expertise and brilliance and effort was on display, and none of the warts of not being able to turn and run the way that he probably once could. And so, yeah, I mean, a masterclass from De Zerbi, putting him in the right spot. I hope that we get to see more of him there and less of him back. But I thought he provided a lot of what we've been missing on the wing. And I'm going to note, he took some corners yesterday. He took some free kicks yesterday, and we created a season high number of chances off dead balls, 6. We've only had 4 other games where we hit even 4. Now, I think that may also have something to do with the fact that they didn't have any true center backs on the pitch to win the ball in the air the way they might have normally. But their center backs aren't towering guys. Romero's not a huge guy in the air. Though plenty physical. But anyway, I thought Milner made a difference in that role. And I have to, say, boy, egg on my face for being so critical of him anytime he's appeared. But again, I don't think we've seen great appearances from him. This was what I think, if we see it online, everybody's talking about. This is the guy we hoped we'd get when we signed him. And boy, was it an important game for him to come through. I mean, we're talking about the performance, but this was a monumentally important win, flipping points that we did not take from this opponent last year. Could not be happier.
Yeah, and I think it's just worth mentioning, just regarding Milner, in his post-match comments, he said about how nice it was to be playing back in midfield after obviously being utilised for his versatility at the back. And boy, did we appreciate that. Kurtis, one of the things that Dagan mentioned earlier is about the formation. And when we had possession, we had just had so many up front. And in that first goal, when you see all the Brighton players lining up in the Spurs box, there was just so many of them. And I don't know if Jack Hinshelwood was or the goalkeeper was a bit surprised that the ball came out to that right-hand side and there was just acres of space. And Hinch, he absolutely leathered the ball. And I think, again, Hinch said in his post-match comments that he didn't mean to hit it. But again, he's one of our own, Jack Hinshelwood. He's just, I would say he's not come out of nowhere, because he hasn't. He's been with the club for a long, long time. But how fantastic is it that he's come through the system and is now scoring and performing so well for the first team?
It's fantastic. I feel a lot of pride to see another fantastic youth player come through the academy and get an opportunity. I mean, it's another feather in our cap, I think, that these young players can eventually get their chance in the first team if they're patient. And he's got so much confidence as well. You can tell by the way he plays, because he was talking about after the game about how the interview asked him, like, it must be quite daunting. You're playing with people like your Welbecks and your Lallanas. And he said, well, I've grown up around adult locker rooms since I was like 5 years old. So it's like nothing to me. I'm used to this environment. So he's just got it. And I think he has a really, really bright future ahead of him. And he's got a great head on his shoulders, just not the one. And he's just a consummate professional. I'm really, really happy for him. And I'm just so excited to see what else he can do.
And, we bemoan all the injuries, but it is probably worth mentioning that if it hadn't been for all of these injuries, we might not have actually seen Jack Hinshelwood in the first team much, if at all, this season. I know that obviously he got a run out in pre-season, but I don't even think in his wildest dreams he would have thought he'd be starting.
I think I'd go as far to say, Tom, it's his spot. Veltman and Lamp to come back. I genuinely believe it's his spot.
100%. I have been very critical of putting Pascal Gross in that spot, not because of the work he does going forward, but because of the lack of pace coming back. But Hinshelwood seems to be able to do the up and down side of that game, very, very well. And we're talking about like inverted fullbacks, which is such a popular part of modern day football. I think Hinch is, as you say, Joe, that's Hinch's role now. Unless Veltman comes back from injury and in training puts in some absolutely ridiculous training match performances, it's Hinch's to lose, as you say. So yeah, it's just fantastic. And I'll repeat that stat again: 19 goals scored by teenagers in this calendar year. That's massive, and I think I've said it in podcasts before. That is going to be such a huge advert for attracting young talent in the January transfer window and the summer, because
you've heard about all these players that we're linked with, right?
Yeah,
you can't tell me that they're not seeing us play and they're seeing these young individuals do really well for us and thinking like, what a great ground for me to grow my skill set at,
Yeah,
and under a great management like De Zerbi,
Yeah, look at this Barco lad from Boca. I mean, I know that Man City don't seem to be in the race anymore, but you are going to go and sit on Man City's bench, or do you want to come and start for Brighton? It's a huge selling point for the club.
Okay, mate, come down the Amex, have a £5 burger, have a beer, you'll love it.
No bottle lid on your Coke, though. Not allowed that.
No, definitely not. Unless you are a Marseille fan and you can bring like flares and stuff, obviously.
I was trying to find where it was posted, but I'm pretty sure the number, Tom, that you're citing, the 19, there were 19 by our teenagers and 16 by teenagers across the entire rest of the Premier League is the number I think I saw. That's mind-blowing. So it's not that we're outpacing the next best team. We're outpacing all of the teams combined. And again, I think it's giving opportunity. I think, Kurtis, you're exactly right? Other players around the world, if they're a young player trying to break into the Premier League and they're wondering, where might I go and get a chance? It is Brighton. It's not maybe Brighton. It is Brighton. And the numbers back that up. So it's really exciting. And I think that gives us an edge in some of these negotiations. And again, Kurtis, to your point, so does having De Zerbi, who hopefully, Real Madrid doesn't pry away from us.
Because we're not like one of those football teams. It's like you've seen Indiana Jones, where they put all those things in neat little boxes and they put them in a warehouse somewhere. We're not a football team that does that. We're not like a Chelsea or a Man City who signs people like Calvin Phillips, who really was once a really exciting player, and now he's just like a Z-lister on the bench, which is quite sad. But you'll get opportunity, you'll get your time if you're patient, and you'll have fun doing it. That's all I'm saying.
And a strong reference to Indiana Jones, which we can all appreciate. Joe, back to the game. You'd be forgiven if you thought after going 1-0 up, Brighton might just take the foot off the accelerator. It's what we've done on many occasions this season, but we didn't. We kept the pressure up. It was quite insane, really. Pedro went close. He skipped inside, had a shot saved by the Spurs goalkeeper. Then we had a corner, which we almost scored from. Van Hecke hitting the post with a header. And then Welbeck got sort of yanked whilst in midair. And the referee waved play on, but VAR gave the penalty. Now, Big Ange, in his post-match comments, didn't seem very, very happy about that penalty. To me, I don't understand how you could think that wasn't a penalty. Joe, in your opinion, was that the right call for VAR to go back and say, "No, mate, you can't do that"?
Yeah, absolutely. I follow a Spurs account called Spurs Army, who I've done some graphic work for before, and they retweeted someone tweeting Kulusevski doing exactly the same thing against Everton, I think a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, and even they were annoyed that Kulusevski has made that action again. So it's not even the first offence. So I don't see why Big Ange would be surprised by the fact that they've conceded a penalty for that. VAR took a little bit of time to come to that
3
decision.
minutes.
I don't know how you can clearly see a handful of shirt and the shirt halfway off of Danny Welbeck's back. What I love when those moments happen is when Jan-Paul Van Hecke is near the controversial moment. His arms, like, I can't imagine being a referee in that moment. You've got this flying Dutchman like shouting at you,
Just
and
barreling towards you, like,
yeah. But it makes you so confident in the stands that, you know, they're going to look at VAR and, you know, something exciting's about to happen and we're going to get that penalty. And something else that everyone noticed was that whilst that VAR check was happening, Joao Pedro was stood on the penalty spot for about 3 minutes. He knew that was a penalty and he knew he was going to score it. I think he's probably the coolest penalty taker I've seen.
Ice in the veins, mate.
It's ridiculous. I think coolest penalty taker I've seen since Tom Mohamed.
Can
Maybe
we just
better.
talk, really? You mentioned about the Van Hecker.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, go and check out the Billy Gilmore Lewis dunk video that I think is on Amazon. And one of the things they've got to do is they've got to like do bad impressions of players. And I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Billy Gilmore does the impression of Jean-Paul Van Hecker, and that's what he's like oh. I just think go check it out. It's well worth doing it. But yeah, Van Hecker's reaction is absolutely priceless. And Dagan, you know, Joe mentions there, Joao Pedro, he's a cool cucumber customer. That was his 7th penalty of this season, and he scored 7 out of 7 at that particular moment in time. He's just so clinical from the spot. And I think, you know, you mentioned already that his game yesterday was so important, and he was just at the heart of everything we did. How does a player just exude so much confidence like that? Because I mean, he's done it in moments in against Marseille. He's done it now against Tottenham to take us 2-0. I mean, the mentality of that man is something else.
Yeah, I think he's just got a lot of swagger. Like the guy's he just oozes, you know, attitude and confidence. And I think every team needs somebody like that. You know, if I were to look around last year, I mean, what element were we missing? That might have been the missing element. Is that sort of youthful brashness? Like our young guys are more sort of composed and quiet and seem to respect the older players on the team. Joao Pedro was like, no, I'm the guy. Like I am the guy. You know, Dunk came, but I don't know what conversation they had on the second penalty. If there was some consideration given to perhaps Dunk taking one for old time's sake, that was not happening. Joao Pedro's, you know, loving the ball. Yeah, he's a special talent. It scares me hearing De Zerbi talk about it. Maybe, you know, a struggle to. You couldn't tell whether De Zerbi was talking about himself or Joao Pedro, but the context made me think he was talking about a potential Joao Pedro departure. And sure enough, I think today I saw him, you know, his situation being monitored by Liverpool and Arsenal. And they can, just it's infuriating. Let's stay on happy topics. Speaking of Titans yesterday, Van Hecker was incredible again yesterday. And probably won't get enough credit, but a lot of our press work and his ability to follow players up the pitch as they came back to receive the ball was really impressive. And then, of course, weaving a beautiful tapestry of obscenity any chance presented itself. Got to give him a shout there too. But no, Joao Pedro is something else, man. And I think it's me 11 for 11 now in all competitions. Is that right? Is it that many?
Well, when he scored the second, he was 8 for 8.
Okay. I couldn't recall. Yeah. I thought I heard on the broadcast here that it was the 10th, his 10th, but maybe they were just wrong.
Yeah. I do know that when he scored the second goal yesterday, he's already matched McAllister's goal tally for last season, but that's obviously Premier League and Europa League. So that's an interesting statistic. Kurtis, we're 2-0 up now. And once again, you'd be forgiven if Brighton sort of just sat back, you know, had a little bit of a chill, but we didn't. And as Dagan's already sort of alluded to, Spurs just could not cope with our intensity in and out of possession. The press from the very front all the way to the back was just absolutely excellent. And then who should pop up and almost score a goal than that guy, James Milner, who's, you know, who hits the post. Absolutely ridiculous. Milner rolling back the years, Kurtis. Rolling them back.
Listen, James Philip Milner. What a guy. What a player. I mean, I was kind of trepidatious myself, obviously, in regards to our word of the day is trepidatious. I was kind of worried, obviously, to see how Milner would play because he has been inconsistent as of late, but also it is worth to note, I should say, that he's been playing out of position and everywhere because he's just one of those players that will do whatever he's asked. So I was just so pleased. And I was watching the game with my brother, who is a Reading FC fan, and he was just like, we watched the whole game, and he was like, Milner was absolutely class. He's my man of the match. He was my personal man of the match. I know we'll talk about that afterwards, probably later on in the pod. But yeah, he was just great. He was so great. So I hope he gets more of an opportunity to play in those positions where he feels comfortable, and we can get performances like that out of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, it was, as I say, rolling back the years. And Joe, just really quickly on that press, I think that's the most intense press I've seen Brighton do, for want of a better word, for a long time. Because one of the things we saw last season was Brighton pressed really high up the pitch. And we haven't really seen that this season, in my opinion. And whether that's because we don't have the manpower without that Caicedo midfield destroyer, I don't know. But yesterday we just seemed to just not give Spurs a moment's peace on the ball, and Spurs just couldn't handle it. And we were punishing them every single time we picked the ball up. And it's not exaggerating to say that we could have gone in at halftime 4-5-0 up.
Oh, it was an onslaught. We were, it was easily the best first half performance of this season by a long stretch. We were, as you say, didn't give them a moment's rest. Ange Postecoglou afterwards said that the Spurs did not have the energy levels to match Brighton at all. And he's absolutely right. And when you play that way against a Spurs side who have Brendan Johnson and Heung-min Son on the wings and Richarlison, who certainly is not a slouch, is big risk. But that's what we get with a De Zerbi side, is high risk, high reward. Yesterday was exactly that. And the people that have questioned our style of play and questioned why we stick to this, yesterday is the perfect answer to it. Because you stick to it and you get these games where the energy levels from every single player on our side are right up here. And then the energy levels of Spurs aren't matching it, and you just steamroll them across the whole pitch. It was a question, though, can we carry that on into the second half? And that was certainly the questions that were going around at halftime amongst the people around me. But
I do think it's worth mentioning that we almost, just before the end of the half, we did almost see a very Brighton moment where Joao Pedro was through one-on-one with the keeper. He tries to chip it past the keeper, but it's saved. And then Spurs went right down the other end of the pitch, and Richarlison just bent his shot wide. So that would have been
which was given a corner, by the way. They were given a corner for that.
No, I don't see the deflection there myself. Even on the replays, I don't see it.
Can we talk about something really quickly, which I found really impressive yesterday?
Was it Facundo Buonanotte?
Well, something else just beforehand. How we managed to make Son like a phantom and a spirit, a ghost. Yeah, I didn't see him at all in the game, and I thought that was so impressive because he's usually quite hard to deal with, and he's a handful, you might say. And we nullified him out there, and that was really impressive. Really impressive.
Jack Hinshelwood.
Whoever was marking him, Randall applause. Applause.
He was pretty much non-existent until the 83rd minute, but more on that a bit later. Let's talk really quickly, Dagan, about Facundo Buonanotte, because he was another player that looked absolutely fantastic yesterday. We've talked a lot about James Milner. Let's talk about Facundo Buonanotte. Again, another player that has found his minutes perhaps somewhat limited at the start of the season, but has definitely benefited, if you can call it that, from the injury situation at the club. He's been playing relatively regularly. He's had some sub appearances, and every time he's played recently, he's looked really useful. And he looked excellent yesterday. He did have the ball in the back of the net, which was rightfully given for an offside. But generally speaking, his performance yesterday was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think he's getting to play in the middle more. And I think he's adapting to the physicality slowly but surely. And I think embracing the fact that he's got to just defend. He's got to defend in addition to creating. And then confidence, that magic button that Roberto De Zerbi seems to push over time. He just seems to be increasing in his level of comfort with both what he's tasked with doing and then actually doing it. And, being more resistant to fouls. And I mean, he is quick to go down. But I think before it was like, I don't think he had control. I think now he's calculating when to go down to draw a foul, as opposed to just falling over because he's not used to being pushed, and these older big guys leaning on him. But I think he's adapting well, and now he's dishing it out some too. It's been fun. You read about a kid's talent and then you look and see like, what is this? This is the next Messi. That seems a huge stretch. And again, that's still probably a stretch for anybody to have that comparison. But he's looking the part of, a top player and talent. And that's having a player in the 10 spot that can unlock the players around him is incredibly useful in this sport. And if he can be that for us, and then, pepper in a few nice runs and some goals too, which I think is there. I really do. I think the goals will come. It's a lot of fun. And again, what are we talking about? 18, 19-year-old kid coming to the squad and making the change. And again, apologies for the dog. We have a delivery.
He's just happy for Facundo because it's been a sensational little bit of run for him. And it's just a real shame, Joe, that we had now turned our attention to some injuries, because it looks like Facundo Buonanotte, the man that we've just been gushing over, had to come off in the second half injured, as did Igor Julio, which could be a real concern given what happened later on in the game, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it almost seems like, Joe, we can't have nice things, because when we do have nice things, something bad's got to happen to even out the niceness. 2 injuries yesterday to an already injury-ravaged squad, and it's just not fair.
Well, Tom, the amount of bad things that have happened from the beginning of the season, losing Caicedo and McAllister, and the amount of injuries we've had, I expect us to qualify for the Champions League and win the Europa League, so that evens out the bad luck that we've had. We're in for a very exciting second half of the season. It's gutting. 2 players that have really shown that they're worthy of being starters in this team. Igor has been monumental. He is absolutely massive. And honestly, I truly believe that when he's running to track back and he comes towards the north stand, I can genuinely feel the floor shake. It's ridiculous. And Facundo Buonanotte, his determination to get into this side and to show Roberto De Zerbi what he can do. He could have so easily gone out on loan. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The professionalism to stick around and wait for your chance. I'm sure there'll be more chances in the future for him. And hopefully this injury isn't too bad and he can just come back and in a week or 2 weeks time and hit the ground running again. But his energy, he seems to have had a mentality switch where it's not all about him. And again, in the Amazon thing, Lewis Dunk highlights Facundo Buonanotte's selfishness when he grabs the ball and goes, it's mine. But he seems to be maturing a little bit. And it's almost a mirror of what we saw with Enciso last season. So I just hope that he comes as good as Enciso and really has an impact on this team.
Yeah, that's actually a good shout. Just as you were talking, it literally flashed in my head about what Lallana said about Julio last year. It's almost like, as you say, a mirror image. It's like poetry. Let's just hope that, as you say, Joe, both of those players aren't out for too long, because otherwise I fear that we're not going to be able to field a team of 11 that doesn't include at least 3 under 23s. One of the big things there, of course, meaning that because Igor came off, Pervis ESTUPIÑÁN came on, and I highly doubt that it was ever intended that he'd have 45 minutes. But he came on, and he looked a bit rusty at times, but he did contribute quite well. in a moment. We'll talk about it in just a moment, but I want to talk about a few things first, because when we came out for the second half, if we're being honest with ourselves, Spurs looked the more likely to score. Richarlison, I think, had the ball in the back of the net twice. Both times were called rightfully for offside. He also shot wide after Son intercepted one of Gilmore's passes. And it did feel like whoever scored the next goal would probably go on to win, if I'm being brutally honest. And that second half was a bit squeaky bum time, personally. But then we saw what I would already put my bets on it is going to be the goal of the season. And it came from a corner of all the places. It came from a corner. It was, of course, Pervis ESTUPIÑÁN's sweet 20-yard strike that swerved and it dipped. And what a way, Dagan, to celebrate your comeback from injury. He shouted into the camera, "I'm back." And Dagan, what a way to announce that he was back.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think for many of our struggles, we forget how instrumental he is to everything that we do, especially in attack, and his ability to overlap. We didn't see as much of that. I thought he was a little bit reserved, but also I think some of that was probably score and not wanting to get too far up the pitch and expose. Because I don't think we saw him putting out a lot of crosses from deep in the corner as he sometimes is wont to do. But on that particular strike, it would be surprising to me if that was the designed play. Part of me thinks he was just open and Milner had the presence of mind to say, this might be either, good for a shot or good for a nice ball in from a nice angle. Right? Like that's not something we look to do often, is sort of play the ball back into space and then create from there. Usually we sort of go with a more direct corner approach. And so again, was that Milner's presence of mind and experience and guile and craft and knowing his personnel and knowing that that's a shot that Pervis can take? I don't know, but I have to give him some credit there too for playing that ball. And then Pervis obviously being ready to strike it. We've seen him unleash some wicked attempts last year, so it wasn't shocking that he chose to fire it, but that he was so new to being back to us just felt like a great moment. And when we talk about the story of the season and the narrative that we want to create, that moment could be one that we look back on as one that sort of changed our fortunes from, "Ooh, no, bad luck," to, "Ooh, a little bit of good fortune," and sort of grabbing the game by the scruff of its neck. And that I didn't feel fully comfortable even after the third goal, given what Spurs attack has looked like and was looking like up to that point. Tom, I think you make a great point. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, the Spurs had more chances inside the box than we did. I mean, they just didn't capitalize. And they put themselves, Richarlison in particular, as you noted, in an offside position a number of times where, just a little more restraint and they would have had chances. It was not a flawless game on our part. It was a pretty flawed game on their side, I think we have to admit. I know that wasn't your question as you're asking about Estupiñán, but you started talking about that early part of the second half, and I was worried. And Buddy texted me about the 1-0 lead, and I was like, we're gonna need a lot more than one to beat the Spurs team, because they score and Ainge ball does its thing. They are a force to be reckoned with, I think, in terms of their ability to score. But they do concede, and they gave us a lot of chances. I mean, we could have had 6 or 7 in the first half, if we're being honest, if things, really break our way. Yeah, really weird game, just in a lot of ways. Just a weird game. But no, Pervis, I hope he's able to start next time out. I think we're going to need him to, given what the injuries look like around the rest of the pitch, especially if Igor's out. And even if Igor isn't out, he's one of 2 healthy center back options. I guess we're going to talk about West Ham here in a bit. That's going to be a real 6-pointer.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to put that bit off because I'm reveling in the positivity of the game. Something we haven't been able to do for quite a while. Yeah, I mean, it was a sensational goal from Pervis, and as I said, I felt that then whoever was going to score the next goal would go on to win the game. And it just so happened to be us. And but we weren't done, Curtis. Spurs gave away another penalty as Evan Ferguson was pretty much just bundled into in the box, just really sloppy defending from Spurs. And, you know, as you say, Dagan, we've got to sort of point out just how bad Spurs were at times. And that was just shocking defending. But who should step up? Once again, Mr. Ice in his veins, Joao Pedro. And he makes it 8 for 8 from the spot. At 4-0, Curtis, at 4-0, did you allow yourself to feel a little bit confident that we might just go and win?
I mean, at that point, regardless of how the rest of the game went, I knew that we would win the game. Regardless of what happened afterwards, I was still pretty confident. Obviously, I was annoyed with how things developed. Just because I was doing that thing, I was like, we might get a clean sheet here. You know, one of those elusive, legendary, mythic things. But yeah, I was pretty comfortable. Like, as soon as that pen went in, I was just like, look at him. He's not human. You know, he's so chill. And then, yeah, taunting and everything, the whole... Oh, remember that reminded me of when we beat Chelsea and Pascal Gross was like, finished. That was so wonderful. But yeah, I was pretty confident that we could see it out as a victory from there, you know.
It was quite nice as well, because I think when we played Spurs last season, Bissouma was giving it large. And then obviously Joao Pedro returned the favour, which was quite nice, because I know it sounds a bit petulant and a bit bitter, but obviously after the game that happened at their place last season, it was just nice to sort of have that sort of back at them. But Joe, as Curtis has alluded to, we can't have nice things. We're not allowed. We're not allowed to have a clean sheet. And unfortunately, it was our captain, our talisman, Lewis Dunk, getting caught in possession. Some pretty sloppy play from Lewis, and in my opinion, lucky to escape a red card. He did get booked, which means he misses the West Ham game. But of course, Brighton concede late on. No clean sheet for us. So let's talk about that goal. Joe, were you disappointed that we conceded, and did you feel that Lewis Dunk was lucky to stay on the pitch?
Yeah, obviously at the time it's happening all the way down the other end of the pitch, so I can't see the Lewis Dunk challenge. I know that Aaron put in the group chat as soon as it happened that it looked a really rash challenge, and there was a pause in the game, and Aaron said could be a red card here, so I was expecting that big purple screen to go up at the MX and say checking possible red card. Luckily that didn't come, but you know, there's still a ban in place because of the yellow card. It's only one game, granted, but leaving us in that position as a captain, knowing that your other only fit centre back has just gone off injured as well, it's always a risk as a centre back that you're going to get a yellow card. I get that, but the challenge, watching it back, looked just silly, really silly. He didn't have to follow through like that. I think he wins the ball anyway, slightly. He gets, that's why he didn't get the red card, I believe, because the intent was to win the ball. But yeah, it's just really stupid. And there's been a couple of those from Dunkey this season, yeah. Which you've pointed out, Tom. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, when I think, okay, we're going to see this game out, win 4-1. At that time, anyway, I'm thinking, whatever. It's okay. We've scored 4 goals. It's okay. Clean sheets, yeah, they would be wonderful. They'd be great. But as long as we get the 3 points, that's all I give a crap about. So, yeah, frustrating, but not surprising.
It's it's the second time this season that Lewis Dunk's left us in the lurch through ill discipline. Because what was it? I can't remember what game it was when obviously he was offensive towards the referee, earning himself a red card when we were, very knee deep in
Nottingham,
injury.
Was it?
Oh, I generally can't remember answers on a postcard. But yeah, second time this season, and as you say, Joe, it's just this really silly decision. I think I get it. Lewis Dunk's been, he's been caught, napping as it were. But yeah, for me, I was baffled that wasn't a red card. Studs up on the ankle, not hugely dissimilar to what we have seen in the past, given as a red card. So I can certainly see why Spurs fans, were really angry at that, because if that had been the other way around, I would have been
Oh
absolutely.
well, what a shame. Never mind. Unlucky Spurs, you cheating. Sorry.
But
Anyway.
as we say, Joe, you can't berate bad decisions when they go against you if you just ignore them when they go for you. We have to
No,
be consistent.
let's talk about the Spurs game last season, Tom.
Yes,
And
but Joe, we can't
just
then
drink.
ignore
No, no,
when
no.
it goes our
Here's
way this time.
here's some
We have to
Spurs
be
tears.
consistent.
Here's some
No,
Spurs tears.
I will be consistent in my calling out of
It's
bad
fine.
officiating.
It's fine.
And I think that it's only fair that Spurs question that, because I was like Aaron, I was convinced we would have seen a red. But even it wasn't a red because it wasn't given as a red. Either way, Donkey's sort of put us in a sticky situation against a West Ham team that made us look a bit silly at the Amex earlier this season. And it's not what you want when you've got loads of injuries. And it also made for a bit of a hairy finish because Spurs weren't done. A cross into the back post. Ben Davies nods into the net. 4-2. Dagan, squeaky bum time. Did you think Brighton were going to cling on, or did you think that the Spurs siege would ruin our day?
I mean, my brain thought we were fine. The rest of my body was writhing in agony that it just seemed like something horrific was going to happen. But we avoided, what would be, I guess, like an all-time monumental collapse to lose a 4-goal lead in the span of, I don't know, whatever the last, 3 minutes plus extra time or something. But it certainly felt possible. I don't know that it felt plausible, but it felt possible. It was terrifying. And they had every bit the number of necessary chances to get the goals that they needed to get back in the game. Yeah, I mean, on Dunk, he slipped, right? He slipped, and then he tried to sort of lunge and get there. And he did get the ball first, which I think did save him, that, he went through, but he just couldn't control himself to not go through the other player. Could it have been a red? Yes. Was it an error? I don't know. Right. I will say there's
Here's a question for you, Dagan. Do you think it would have been a red if Spurs hadn't then gone on to score?
I think it would increase the likelihood that it could have been. I do think that entered into the equation. Well, they scored. Yeah. Well, they were given a penalty. Yeah. And clearly it wasn't to stop a chance. It wasn't that kind of situation. Yeah. I say confidently that I have no confidence in what will be called a red card and a yellow card in those situations, because it just is all over the map. It wasn't that dissimilar to the one like Malo Gusto got a red card earlier this year where he got the ball first. Now he was moving at speed and he did come flying in. And I think that helped Dunk too, is he was coming from like sitting on his behind basically, then just kind of lunging. So there wasn't a ton of force, which seems to matter. Whether it should or not is up for debate, but yeah.
Especially that Nottingham Forest game the other when was that? I've lost all track of days, but obviously we saw the Nottingham Forest game the other week with the second yellow card, which is absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah.
So as you say, Dagan, you just don't know these days, do you? Because what one referee will say is a red card offence or a second yellow or whatever, another referee won't. The lack of consistency, is absolutely mind-boggling. But to your point, Dagan, Højbjerg hit the post, Son fired into the side netting. It was certainly a nerve-wracking finish. But thankfully, we saw the game out and we won a game of football and we won 4-2. It was like Brighton from the earlier part of the season, scoring more than one goal and then not sitting back after we did score and actually going to get more goals. And we looked better for it. Easily the best performance we've seen in a long time.
I don't care if we never keep another clean sheet in the history of the club. I don't care if we win. If we win more games than we lose, we're doing certainly. I mean, if we win more games than we lose or draw combined, which is sort of what we've done over the past year, then I'll take it, right? If you win 50% of your games in this sport, you're doing well. So if we can get back to that trajectory, I don't care how many goals we concede. As long as we have one more than the other team every time out, I'll be very happy with it. And I think that's deserving ball, for better or worse. So the moaning about the clean sheets, like I just don't care. I'm sorry for those of you who are
Duncan, the back line are moaning that they're not getting their clean sheet bonuses.
That's a fair point.
I bet Tony Bloom's going, yes, I'm not having to pay out any clean sheet bonuses.
There's your conspiracy theory, Tom. You could hang on to that one. Club policy giving away goals to avoid paying bonuses. There you go.
I'm on to you guys. I just want to come to this before we do man of the match, Kurtis. I just want to come on to this. User Brightonian on or is it Brighton Ian? I never know. On X put a really interesting tweet about the rotation policy. And I hope they don't mind me using this on the pod, and I'm giving them props for it. Kurtis, Brightonian tweeted, was last night the first real vindication of Roberto De Zerbi's full rotation policy? I think this is just a really interesting talking point, because we've seen this season a lot of players being played out of position. We've seen a lot of change in personnel from game to game. But in a game like last night, where we played almost a completely different system, not just in personnel, but tactically and positionally as well, it all just seemed to come together really nicely. And I think many people have, are onto something when they say, but because we've been doing this since September, we're starting to reap the rewards of these players being able to play in different positions and different systems. What do you think, Kurtis? I mean, I'll invite you all to have your say on this point as well. But I just thought it was a really interesting talking point after going out there, not playing our standard 4-2-3-1, playing something completely different, and taking Spurs to the cleaners.
I think a couple of arguments could be made here. I think it predominantly could be the fact that things are just starting to gel, and the sort of fringe players are starting to understand more how things should be played. But there's also an argument where just Tottenham that bad last night that we made them look painfully average, but I'm going to go with the fact that I just feel like people are understanding what De Zerbi wants and what he wants from them, and I just think that each player is playing for the team and they're playing for each other, and they just get it, and I believe it showed. But also, I think it's also fair to say that Tottenham weren't at their best yesterday, and it's not always going to be like that in games, especially West Ham are going to be really tough, really, really tough. So we have to be careful how we line up there, because they are a team that could punish us, so we'll just have to see. I mean, if it continues this way, if we continually are good with the rotation and things like that, then fantastic. And obviously it would be nice to have a sort of solid first 11, but I've sort of given up on that a while ago now, because the amount of rotation and a lot of our I don't like to say good players, because that's not a thing, but a lot of the big names are obviously out injured, so we're having to do what we're having to do, and it's seemingly working at the moment. So we'll just see how it continues.
I just wanted to add, I think what the past rotation set us up to do in this game, where it was very clearly two teams battling a ton of injuries with patchwork lines in different places, we were more ready to do that than they were, because they have had a more core group with minimal rotation throughout the year. So to ask their players to play out of position was a heavier lift than it was for us. And I think that's Brightonian's point, is that, by virtue of all this moving around and guys sort of being told, hey, this is how the system works. This is how you're supposed to be a part of that system today. And just being like, oh, okay, cool, I'll do that. They're naturally going to get better at it over time. If you're never played out of position, you will not be adept at it. So it makes sense. And maybe it is the long game, because it's inevitable that there will be injuries. It's inevitable that we'll have to make these changes at some point. And the hope, I guess, is in the long haul, we'll have fewer injuries. And when we do, guys will be able to step up. So I thought it was a well-made point too. And I do wonder about the club's, long-term strategy with injury prevention, and if there is really something at play because De Zerbi keeps using this term, I have to, right? When you talk about rotation, that implies there's more than just, it's his idea to rotate players at this level. So I can't help but wonder if that's at play too. And obviously the early returns are not great on keeping our players healthy over the long haul, but maybe for the extent of their careers and more, there's some planning at work between limiting their minutes. I was just looking at Joao Pedro, and I mean, he's only started 13 games between Europa League and Premier League so far. That's not that many starts for a guy who also has 13 goals in that span of games. I think he's played, I think it was 26. I think he's played total, something like that.
I think just want to pick up on one of the points you made there, Dave. It harps back to this idea about playing young players, and this idea that unless you play a young player, how are they ever going to be ready? I think that's the same with any of our fringe players, for want of a better phrase. How are they ever going to be adept in De Zerbi ball or how the way Brighton want to play if they're never played? And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Dagan, in that when you come up, two sides come together, both having a set of injuries, the side that has cycled out their players more frequently and everyone's getting minutes here and there are going to fare generally better than a team that has lost a huge core to their squad. So a point well made there.
We saw it last season as well, with obviously Evan Ferguson coming through and getting his chance and, taking that by the scruff of the neck. A lot of people were saying Julio Enciso wasn't ready, but he continued to play. And you saw the rewards at the end of the season. We're just seeing that on a greater level with more players having to come in because of the injury crisis. One thing I do think as well is that towards the end of the season, I think we're going to see a surge in our performances and maybe a drop off from other teams that haven't maybe been doing as much rotation as we have, because we're going to have these players come back from injury, hopefully as emphatically as Pervis ESTUPIÑÁN did, but if they're all coming back at the right moment and we've got these things in place to make sure that they're not coming off the bench against Ajax and getting injured after 10 minutes, then we're going to be in a really healthy way come sort of March, April time. And, and that's when the Europa League comes back. So bring on Dublin, I say.
Just before we go on to the man of the match, what you've just said, Joe, about the injuries and everything, it's just pinpointed this particular stat. It's now halfway through the season. Brighton currently sits 8th, 1 point, and 2 places worse off than this time last season. And I think that's genuinely remarkable, considering the injuries we've had, the amount of games we've played. I think that is genuinely remarkable. And as you say, Joe, it's it does sort of indicate that when we get all these players back, actually, we're going to be we should, fingers crossed, be in a really healthy position where we've got a lot of players coming back from injuries. And as long as we manage those minutes well, and as long as we're not putting players into situations where they're going to get reoccurrence of those injuries, we hopefully should be really strong in the run-in. And then it was probably in the run-in last season that we were much more inconsistent after the FA Cup semi-final. We were a bit all over the place. So if we can keep a consistent run together with those returning players, maybe a few new additions in January, we could see another historic end to the season. So let's all keep our fingers crossed for that, and let's hope that the optimism that we showed at the beginning of the season, thanks to our American friend Dagan, continues late on into the season. Let's finally then talk about the man of the match. So I'm going to come to you first, Joseph. Who was your man of the match, please?
I should have been thinking about this the whole time, really, after Kurtis mentioned his man of the match about 40 minutes ago. Can you go to Dagan first? Dagan, do you have a man of the match? Okay, go. You go.
Man of the match is Joao Pedro. Period. I mean, so big a part of the goals. And you got to have goals to win. And that game, you certainly had to have goals. So for all the good things that other guys did, and there were many good things done by many players, for me, he's my man of the match.
I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to say the same thing. Scored 2 penalties, involved heavily in the first goal. And he was just a menace, the defensively as well as offensively. He was just excellent from, front to back. And Glenn posted a tweet earlier about who is the most important player this season, and for me, it's Joao Pedro. I think there's a worthy shout out to Pascal Gross there, but Joao Pedro has just been different gravy. And this is a time of year where different gravy is kind of a popular thing because Christmas, New Year, and gravy. So yeah, Joao Pedro, my man of the match. How about you, Kurtis? Give Joe some extra time.
Well, it's interesting because obviously I feel like it's on paper. Obviously, it's Joao Pedro, and I feel like that he is the man of the match. But I want to go out against that because it's just so obvious that he's man of the match. So for me, it is Milner, just because it was so unexpected. That's why he's my man of the match, because I didn't see it coming, and he bossed it in that first half, and I was so bloody impressed. So yes, Milner.
Yeah, kudos. Yeah, man possessed in that first half, definitely. Joe,
I'm gonna throw one out there, and I'm gonna say. Again, I think I agree with you, Curtis, that, man of the match probably is Joao Pedro, but just to be different, I'm going to say Jan-Paul van Hecke. I think his transformation into becoming our next leader is so obvious now. When there's performances where we're talking about Lewis Dunk making the rash decisions and Jan-Paul van Hecke being the Colossus, it's so impressive.
Future captain, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And he's so important to this team. And who would have thought 12 months ago that Jan-Paul van Hecke would be so important to this team? And yeah, I've loved watching him this season. Long may it continue. So Jan-Paul van Hecke, my man of the match.
Yeah, who would have thought that when we lost Levi Cole, when Levi Cole went back to Chelsea after his loan spell, who would have thought we had his replacement ready and waiting? He's been absolutely phenomenal this season. I do think he plays better with Dunk alongside him, but yeah, 100% fantastic player.
Let's say good choices, y'all. If I were to have a medalist tower, those would be the other two that would be on it. So I think those are choices well made. I think you make a case for
as much as it pains you to say, Dagan, about Milner.
It doesn't. It thrills me. I was right there with you and just reveling in the joy. I'm happy to be wrong if it means good things for us. Now I will go back to screaming if he's back, left back or right back. Don't you worry. But if he's up top, he certainly earned himself another chance to play.
Well, listen, you cussing him out and saying bad stuff about him did make him have a good performance yesterday, Dagan. So
I'm sure he's listening.
I've heard he is a massive listener of the Albion Obsessed podcast.
Yeah.
And
drinks his Ribena and listens to the podcast. So.
Yeah, I'm just happy he was in a position to be successful, and he got
so
many big plays.
To be fair, Dagan, you talk about the prospect of him going back to left back and right back. That's a very real possibility as we look ahead to West Ham now. Igor Julio injured, Achilles tightness, I think he said on Instagram, and I know a lot of fans are sort of going, "Oh, phew, that's nothing to worry about." And no, that's not a good thing at all. You've got to be so careful with your Achilles. So Igor could be out. Facundo could be out. Dunk. Thanks, Lewis. Dunk's going to be out. It's going to be a tough old game, and we've sort of been scratching our heads thinking, "Oh, who's going to start where?" I genuinely don't know who's gonna play that game against West Ham. Assuming Facundo and Igor are out, Pervis you'd assume would come back into the back four. But then who plays alongside Van Hecke? Do you put Baleba there as a makeshift centre back? Do you put Hinshelwood there? Hell, put Pascal Gross there because he plays everywhere else anyway.
He played there in pre-season against Chelsea.
Know. And I think someone's going to have to step up and play next to Van Hecke because if Igor is injured, because my goodness gracious me,
Tom, what are you doing next Tuesday? Are you free?
Oh mate, I'm a coach. I'm not a player. Those days are long gone. But yeah, I'm genuinely scratching my head at who could possibly be in that starting 11 against the West Ham team that have just beaten Arsenal.
The good thing is Kudus won't be playing because he's going off to the AFCON. Thank God he can't score a hat-trick.
Did you guys see Roberto De Zerbi's reaction to being told that Arsenal lost to West Ham? It was quite like surprised and shocked because obviously when we lost to Arsenal, he went out and said that Arsenal were the best team in the Premier League, and they've just been beaten by West Ham. It's a head scratcher. Tuesday, it really is.
To that point, talking about our position, not only are the things you said true that we're a point behind where we were last year, we're way closer to the top. We were 19 points off through 19 games last year. We're 12 points off the top of the table right now. And I'm not suggesting that, we're making a run to the top, but I'm just saying there are a big group of teams. There's a lot more parity this year. This time last year, you already had sort of, City and Arsenal distancing themselves from the pack. And then the pack below was similarly large at this time last year. But we've got to keep putting points up because we've got Chelsea and Wolves and Bournemouth, two teams that are very hot and another that is up and down. I'll let everybody figure out who's who in that equation. But yeah, lots of points to be gained. I think lots of reason for optimism. I know I'm prone but it's a promising time. I think we have.
I'll be more optimistic, Dagan, when I'm not having to go through the under 23 squad on the club website to figure out who might be on our bench.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
When does the window open? The first? Can we sign a centre back on the first, ready to play for the second?
Yeah, if we can get the paperwork done in time. Why not?
If we got Matt Vienko, who played for De Zerbi previously, who we were linked to, maybe that'd be pretty funny. That would be pretty comical. I don't know that could happen.
Since when have you known Brighton to get their business done early? Actually, in the summer we did. To be fair,
or we get linked with someone for months and then nothing happens.
Yeah,
so that's just yeah.
But West Ham might be without
Tony, spend your money.
Who suffered an injury and had to leave. He was injured in warm-ups and then he had to leave like 30 or so minutes in. Obviously, there were no worse to wear, but they had already put a goal up when he exited. And he is a player that I worry about because he's
Paqueta, right?
Yeah. He's brash and physical and wins the ball and then attacks and often is the like unlocking player in their counter. I feel like who sort of transitions from the defense to the offense, and so that would be a gap. And I'm not sure about Kurtis. Are we 100% sure about that, Joe? Is that accurate? Will he be gone?
Yeah, they're joining up with each other on the 31st of December, I believe.
Okay.
So, yeah, lucky times.
That's great.
I've got a mad idea.
On the Asian Cup and the Cup.
Mad idea, Tom.
I've got a mad idea. So, in the last episode of Buzz's Boot Room Quiz between Jean-Paul Van Hecke and Jason Steele revealed that he used to play in midfield.
No.
Jason Steele as a centre-back alongside Van Hecke.
No.
With Bart Verbruggen in goal. Make it happen, Roberto. Make
Absolutely
it happen.
Mental.
For the lols. I genuinely actually don't know. Can you do that? Like, there
surely
can't be a rule against it, because if outfield players can go in goal...
Surely their fitness levels would not match up to a player that plays
Get
outfield.
on the treadmill. Come on, Jason. Get on the treadmill, lad.
Yeah. I'd much rather see Verbruggen at centre back, given his height, over Steely, but whatever.
Why are we even entertaining this?
I don't know. This is the point we've got to, Curtis.
We have one centre back. One.
I'm going to tweet this out. Listen to the whole of the Albion Obsessed podcast to hear the most ludicrous suggestion you've heard.
You should put a straw poll out. Who would you rather have in midfield?
No, I don't want Steele in midfield. I want him at centre back. No, I joke. I would rather have Pascal Gross at centre back or Hinshelwood.
Yeah, you saw my bit today was, De Zerbi could do the funniest thing. That's like the only outfield position missing from Milner's list of positions played is centre back. And honestly, I think he would do a fair job. He'd probably give away a pen, but he'd be physical.
I think if all the players, if we're genuinely stuck for a centre back, I'd put Baleba in there.
What if we just play one at the back?
Hell, we used to under Graham Potter.
Exactly.
No. Answers down below in the comment section, Albion Obsessed listeners and viewers. Who would you rather play at centre back? Jason Steele, but Carlos Baleba, Pascal Gross, or James Milner? Or can Roberto De Zerbi dust off his boots and join in the crew?
before we go, just to speak on that, there was a lot of chatter. Has De Zerbi been figured out? There's been chatter about that. You look at the tacticians, you look at people that write about the game, and I thought he was masterful yesterday with those adjustments. So, questioning lineup decisions and getting frustrated about whatever. He put on a clinic yesterday with dialing up exactly the right thing for our opponent and with the personnel that we had available to us. So if there's reason to be optimistic about anything, it's that he will put the best guys out there to do the job that he possibly can, and get us through with another 6-pointer. This would be, like I said, it going to this Spurs game, it would be monumental to get these 3 points. Similar setup for Tuesday. West Ham riding a wave. We're going there. There's every reason why they should be up for it, but it does feel like it could be a trap game for them. So I'm just going to hope that they fall on their face when everything is.
Well, the game.
I mean, we do have a better record, don't we, against West Ham? So we'll see.
This season was the only time since we've been promoted to the Premier League that they've beaten us in the Premier League.
And I just want to mention, Tom, before we go on, De Zerbi, rumor has it that we are confident that he's going to sign a new deal. I don't know how true those reports are, but to Tony Bloom, I'm going to channel my inner Rio Ferdinand here, get a blank checkbook, let him write whatever number he wants on there, sign the thing, Roberto. He's at the wheel. We're going to win the Europa League.
That same report talked about a substantial release clause.
Yes.
What do you guys think that would be?
£168 billion.
3 donkeys and a packet of Starburst from the North Stand concourse.
Well, I mean, Potter was like 25 million or something silly like that,
For
right?
him and his staff, yeah.
So
30.
like
50?
Yeah.
Have you seen the price of Starburst in the North Stand concourse?
Yeah.
And you'll get a bottle of Coke with a bottle cap.
Settle down, Joe. All right, mate.
Won't be very happy with that.
There's a Piglet's pantry involved. I hear a lot about that too.
Piglet's pantry pie as well. Yep, get them in there.
What I will say is, I hope that this is perhaps a bit, greedy of me. I hope that if Roberto is about to sign the Ting, I do hope that there is some assurances there that he will be bolstered by reinforcements in January.
Yeah,
I know it's easy to spend Uncle Tony's money, but I think our squad really does need some reinforcements in January, and I hope that is one of the things that is making Roberto go, you know what? Yeah, let's do it.
Do you think he's, not to prolong the point, but do you think he's waiting until after the January transfer window to see if he gets backed?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, let's be honest. Roberto De Zerbi has obviously made it really clear that he loves, working at Brighton and Hove Albion. He loves the group of players, so he's saying all the right things. But, behind the scenes, if he feels like he's not being backed, then there will be a certain level of sort of disgruntlement there. Because if he's got aspirations to go on and win trophies, to do unthinkable things. I mean, I know he said last year about Brighton finishing in the top 6 was better than any trophy. I'm sure that's just a bit of mouth service. I'm sure he wants to be winning trophies. That's what the best coaches in the world want. But if he doesn't feel like he's being backed to do that, I mean, some of the comments he's made about this is the club policy. This is the club policy. Sometimes I hear him say things like that. And I do kind of go, is that him kind of going, you need to give me more. If you want us to finish in the top 4, if you want us to go on and keep progressing each year, you've got to give me the resources.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. Back him or lose him. If you don't back him in January, I think he's gone in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. If he's not backed in January, and you've got some Italian giants coming in the summer, I know there's not much money in the Italian leagues at the moment, but he's an Italian. He's if a huge Inter or someone come along.
There's an and there.
Down.
There's an and I think that we're skipping though. If he's not back to the degree we want, and the results don't match what he's hoping for, because I do think if we come healthy and we don't have the January that we think we want to, and you guys know I'm one who wants to get players in January, but if despite that we win Europa League, I think that I don't know that it'll matter, especially if we then bolster in the summer to be ready for Champions
Yeah,
League.
you're right.
I do agree with that, Dagan, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
also
agree.
a what if sort of guy. What if we get to the Europa League final and we lose it, and then that mentality shifts between, well, if I had been backed in January.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. They're just presenting that there is an and. That,
Oh yeah, I definitely think so. And I don't think Roberto De Zerbi is one to do a Gus Poyet and throw his toys out the pram and go, we've hit a ceiling, blah 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 blah. But I think that he's got ambitions to go on and be one of the best coaches in the world, which many of his sort of peers think. We all know that Pep loves him to bits. But you want, as Joe says, you want to keep him. You gotta back him.
There's a part of me that thinks the kind of character that he is, and I know I've said this before, that he wants to do it somewhere like Brighton, that he wants to take Brighton to the Champions League, that he wants to make something that's never been great, because that's really putting your stamp on something in a way that's profound, and that can never be, you can't, well, of course he won the Champions League at Man City or at Real Madrid, but, no one's going to say, well, of course he won the Europa League at Brighton, right? Like that's never going to be said.
Dagan's getting me excited again now that we're going to win the Europa League, and I'm just picturing Lewis Dunk holding that trophy, and I can't deal with it emotionally, Dagan. I just can't.
I'm just seeing James Milner eating his bran flakes out of it.
4 wins, guys. 4 wins from holding that trophy. That is real talk. 4 wins. There's 7 games.
Let's not get. Oh, breathe, everyone. Breathe.
Excuse me. It's 4 to the championship, right? Is it 4? Because we're at 6.
So if we win, so last 16.
Oh, yeah, 7.
Quarterfinal, semi-final.
Yeah.
If we win those.
Yep, and then champions. So 4 wins.
Yeah, so we had to draw 3, win 3, and then win the final.
I'm
Dagan, stop making me believe that this can happen.
I'm tapping the believe sign, everyone. Tapping the believe sign.
That's what we can hope for. But yeah, let us know in the comment section down below what you think about Roberto De Zerbi signing, quote unquote, the Ting. And let us know what you also think about going ahead to West Ham, where we look quite light in personnel. As ever, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to check out One Clock Shop and use the code Albion Obsessed to get 10 whole percentage off your order.
That's a good deal.
It's a fantastic deal. So go and check those out if you like vintage shirts. I don't think I've got anything else to say, apart from thank you to Joe, Dagan, and Kurtis for joining me this evening. Thank you guys for listening along. And wherever you may be, whenever you may be, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Happy New Year.
Oh, and Happy New Year. I forgot about that. Happy New Year, everyone.